The Backlog. It was a very busy week on the island of Sodor. Lots of visitors had come over from the mainland for the big harvest festival. It was a happy, festive time. But for everyone on the railway this meant extra work. The Fat Controller had to make sure there would be enough trains to carry all his passengers. To make matters even worse, Henry and Boko were both at the works for repairs which simply had to be done. The Fat Controller had to change his timetables. Percy and James were asked to stop their shunting work for the time being so they could pull passenger trains instead. James was particularly excited. "The Fat Controller has asked me to pull the passenger train because my red coat is so splendid," boasted James. "I shouldn't be shunting trucks anyway." The festival was held near the main station. The Fat Controller's grandchildren, Stephen and Bridget, merrily danced on the village green with the other children. The engines were kept busy all week, pulling passenger trains. Meanwhile, in the yard, the trucks were left on the sidings. There were no engines to pull them. At the end of the busy week, the Fat Controller realised there was a problem. "There is a backlog of goods trains to be cleared," announced the Fat Controller. The Fat Controller gave the engines their instructions and they set to work. Percy and James were sent back to shunt trucks, much to James's disappointment. As soon as a goods train was ready, an engine was there to pull it. All the engines worked into the night. The big lights shone on the yard so they could see. On and on the engines worked. "We can do it," sang Edward as he worked. Even Gordon pulled trucks. The stars and moon shone brightly. On they went from the main station to the big harbour and back, up and down from the quarries and clay pits, back and forth between the factories and along the branch lines. By sunrise all the goods trains had been delivered. The Fat Controller came to thank his engines. "Well done, all of you," he said. "But where is Thomas?" "Here I am," called Thomas. "I had to fetch the post train." "Splendid," said the Fat Controller, feeling very proud indeed of all his really useful engines. There's a celebration on the Fat Controller's railway today for all his staff and their families. Can you look closely at this picture and answer a few questions about what you can see? Excellent! Which engine can you see in the picture? Everyone knows who this engine is. That's right, it's Thomas the Tank Engine himself. What number engine is Thomas? Thomas has his number painted on his side. It's a big yellow number 1. Thomas is the number 1 engine on the Fat Controller's railway. What is Thomas's driver waving? That's right, the driver is waving a red flag. I hope when the party is over he remembers to give it back to the guard. Is the signal up or down? The signal is up. When the signal is up, it means the engine has to stop. Who is flying high in the sky? It's a helicopter, and there's only one helicopter on the island of Sodor. It's Harold, of course. Can you spot a very tiny caterpillar? No, it's not on the flowers. Caterpillars like eating leaves. Ah, there it is, right up the top, munching on a leaf. What is the Fat Controller holding in his hand? That's right, it's a drink. You can't have a party without drinks. Now, let's have another story. The Disappearing Shovel. It was autumn on the island of Sodor and the leaves had started to change colour. red, orange, yellow and brown. They fell from the trees and covered the ground. Edward was waiting on a siding when his fireman arrived. "Good morning, Edward," he said. "I've brought you a new shovel." He showed it to Edward proudly. Edward was pleased. "Where's your driver?" asked the fireman. "He's not here yet," replied Edward. "That means I have time for a nice cup of tea," said the fireman. He leaned the new shovel up against Edward's wheels and went over to the shed. A little later he came back with Edward's driver. He was telling him about the new shovel. "Just wait till you see it," he said. Then the fireman stopped and looked surprised. "What's the matter?" asked Edward's driver. "My new shovel," shouted the fireman. "It's gone. I left it just here leaning on Edward's wheels." "How could a shovel disappear?" asked the driver. "Someone must have borrowed it," said the fireman. They both asked Edward if he had seen anyone take it, but he hadn't. "Someone must have crept up quietly," said the fireman. "Why would anyone take our new shovel?" said Edward. "All the other engines have shovels of their own already." Just then the Fat Controller arrived. "Why are you still here, Edward?" he asked. "You have a train to pull." "Yes, sir," said Edward. "But, sir, our new shovel has been stolen," cried the fireman. Clang! Just at that moment the Fat Controller bumped his foot on something under the autumn leaves. He bent down to see what it could be and pulled out the new shovel. "Is this what you were looking for?" he asked. "Oh, yes, sir, thank you, sir," said the fireman. "It must have slipped down under the leaves." "Well, now you can use your splendid new shovel to fill Edward's firebox with coal and make lots of steam. The passengers must not be kept waiting," said the Fat Controller. Henry and Diesel. Henry is one of the oldest engines on the Fat Controller's railway. He used to look quite old-fashioned until he was given his new shape, of which he is very proud. Henry did not like to work with Diesel at all. Diesel was always scheming and trying to cause trouble. He often teased the other engines in his oily voice too. One day Henry had to go down to the big harbour. He wasn't looking forward to it though, because he knew he would see Diesel when he got there. But he had to go. "I know just what Diesel will say," puffed Henry. "He'll start teasing me about what an old engine I am, and how diesel engines are the best. Whew!" When Henry arrived at the harbour yard, Diesel was there, as he expected. "Where are you going, Creaky?" he said. "I'm surprised to see you're still working. Isn't it time you were retired to the scrap heap?" taunted Diesel. "I am still a really useful engine," replied Henry crossly. "But you're just, Diesel just chuckled in his smooth, oily voice and slipped away. "You should have called him Oily," Percy told Henry. "Don't take any notice of him." Henry was surprised when later that afternoon the harbour station master came running over to see him. "Diesel's had an accident on a siding," he told him. "He's come off the rails, Henry," said the station master. "You must take the crane to him." Henry was reluctant to go at first, but eventually pulled away. When Henry arrived with the crane, he saw Diesel looking very silly. Diesel had gone so fast around a bend that he had swerved right off the rails and onto his side. "Oh, hello, Henry," whispered Diesel quietly. "What are you doing?" "I have come to help you," laughed Henry, "but you think I'm only good for scrap." "Oh, spluttered Diesel. "There is nothing more useful than helping a really useful diesel like myself." Henry waited while the crane lifted Diesel back onto the rails. As soon as Diesel began to move, Henry started to pull away with the crane. But the men hadn't locked the arm of the crane. Bang! Down it came on top of Diesel. Ouch! He cried. You did that on purpose! Henry just laughed. At last Henry felt as if he had repaid naughty Diesel for all the teasing that he'd had to endure. The Fat Controller receives a lot of letters from boys and girls all over the world. He's now sat in his office replying to some of them. Let's take a look. Dear Fat Controller, while we were on holiday, my mummy and daddy bought me a mug with an engine on it called Mallard. I like the engine Mallard because it reminds me of Gordon the Big Express engine. My brother has a mug with an engine on it called Evening Star. Do you drink your tea out of a mug with an engine on? From Lyndon, aged 3. Indeed I do. I have a very special mug which is very dear to me. It has a splendid picture of Thomas the Tank Engine on it. Dear Fat Controller, last Sunday my daddy took me to the Ratty at Eskdale. It's a small railway and I saw trains that look just like Thomas, Percy and Donald. I really enjoyed watching the coalmen shoveling coal into the furnace. I had a great day. Have you ever been to Eskdale? Love from Ryan, aged 3. I most certainly have, and I totally agree with you, Ryan. Eskdale is a very enjoyable and entertaining place to visit indeed. Dear Fat Controller, do your grandchildren, Stephen and Bridget, ever help you or the guards on the railway on the island of Sodor? Lots of love from Stephen, aged 5. Dear me, no. The railway can be a very dangerous place for young children to be without supervision. However, they frequently visit the stations and from a safe position watch Thomas and his friends hard at work. Yours, Sir Chopham Hatt, the Fat Controller. If you liked what you heard, please consider leaving a like below as well as commenting and subscribing. And you can also press the bell next to the subscribe button so that you never miss a video. See you again soon. Bye.